Paranormal in Pennsylvania may discuss topics such as suicide, murder, and other potentially upsetting things. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to Paranormal in Pennsylvania,
where we discuss history and haunts.
Today's story takes us to a hiking trail. I'm Sarah.
And I'm David. Spooky.
Let's get into it.
Spooky.
This season, we're being sponsored by our friends at Haunted US. They travel the country bringing you real stories of American hauntings every Thursday at hauntedus.com. Okay, so Bushy Run Battlefield.
It's very bushy.
You and I have hiked it a few times. The first time, I think we just were doing hikes in the Pittsburgh area. And the second time was for the podcast.
Yes.
And it's pretty cool. It's not far from Pittsburgh. It's 40 minutes?
No, I think it was like 30, like closer to 30 than it was 40.
It's 30 to 40 minutes. And the whole battlefield is comprised of 213 acres with both forests and fields. So there's two sides to the park split by a road. You can pick which side you want to hike and you want to be on. And the battle here took place in August of 1763, which was Pontiac's War. You might remember Pontiac's War from when we mentioned it from Fort Pitt episode. And the British actually won this battle, which was key because it prevented the movement towards Fort Pitt, which would have led to it ultimately being captured. So through this battle, the British were able to hold on to Fort Pitt, which was very key for the war. And Colonel Henry Bouquet was on the British side, and on the Native American side, there was a combined force of Delaware, Shawnee, Mingo, and Huron tribes. The British were ambushed by the native forces, but they were able to hold their ground, and the natives eventually withdrew after sundown. They famously, I'll say, although I didn't know this till we went there, used sacks of flour to build up defenses. So remember when we were at the top by the memorial and they had those fake sacks of flour?
Yeah, but it wasn't built, well, it was building defenses, but so they could put the wounded and cover, like hide them behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it was makeshift walls and then they could care to the wounded and, duck behind them. Which if you think about it, flour's heavy and dense. Not a bad idea for thinking on your feet, Well,
I mean, for the size of the bags, because these aren't like small sacks or anything. These are very large, almost look like logs of flour.
They were huge, like 5 feet long, would you say?
About.
Yeah, so very big. Like big bags of ice is how I picture them. Like the width of a bag of an ice.
Oh, okay. I'm like, we just talked about how they're like 5 feet long. You're like in a big bag of ice, which is not 5 feet
long. Yeah. So the width of a bag of ice and 5 feet long, but full of flour. And today it's really cool because the topography of the battlefield is actually completely intact. So you could really see what people were experiencing when they were there that day. And the positions and maneuvers can be, quote, seen through various plaques that they have throughout the battlefield. So you can actually trace the route that people took, and they have named hiking trails. They also have the plaques, like I mentioned, which is really cool. The wooded portion of the park is 90 acres, so it's a pretty big portion. And it does give a sense to the original environment and feel of the battle there. The park was actually established back in the 1920s, which is much older than I would have expected.
Yeah, I mean, well, no. Wouldn't that coincide with when Roosevelt made the national parks?
I had not considered that. I was like, 1920s? What a random time point.
Erica, when was the National Parks Act created?
The park had been around for about 90 years, and it was set to be closed in 2010. But they agreed that they could run the park solely on volunteers, and it was able to stay open. Okay. National Park Act.
So it was enacted August 25th of 1916.
Okay, 4 years after.
Sounds like within a very reasonable time frame.
Someone knows their history timeline. Way to go. I did not know.
Thanks.
That. So yeah, it's interesting. I couldn't tell if the park is still run completely by volunteers, but that was how they managed to keep it open in the recession, which is cool. That people felt so passionately about it. And I mean, I guess what else are you going to do? Just keep the land.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about it being a national park is that it just stays. It's not like you close down a business and it's like, oh, I can't go there anymore.
Right.
You said it's 120 acres? Yeah, good luck keeping people out of that.
Right, especially close to Pittsburgh, you know? It's not like it's in the middle of nowhere. It's close to a city. So that is the history. Very interesting, and I do think it's cool that you can really see what they experienced in terms of topography. And it is cool that they have the life-size bag of flour there. I like that part.
Yeah, to be clear, they are not actually bags of flour now. It's like concrete, cement, something.
Yeah, it's like plaster
some material.
Or something. Yeah, but I like anything that is a visual aid that can help be immersive while still being, obviously, not in a battle. So, moving on to the paranormal story. Apparently, they have paranormal tours here. I did not know that.
Oh, I didn't see any information about it.
Neither did I. Which is part of why I wonder if it's still run by volunteers. Because if it's run by volunteers, I wonder if they cycle the types of events they have based on the volunteers that they have available.
That makes sense.
That could make sense. But that means that they know it's haunted. And we know it's haunted. So, one of the hauntings is... What? Why are you laughing?
Means they know it's haunted. That means we know it's haunted. Like,
I mean, it's correct. You know that now because I just told you.
Yeah, I'm so glad I now know that we know it's haunted. We're there.
Up until this point in the episode,
I thought
you couldn't be sure.
I thought this was a history podcast.
It was a history podcast. Now it's spooky. So one of the hauntings is allegedly a full body apparition of Native American soldiers that died during the battle. And this is interesting because their deaths weren't very well documented. We do know that 60 British soldiers perished that day. But, you know, they always say the victors write history. So who knows?
Well, they might not. I don't know Native American combat tactics or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But did they take their dead with them? Were their bodies to even count?
I don't know. I guess that's a good point. I don't know.
Yeah, so like if they were, because they retreated, it wasn't like they were wiped out. They could have taken their dead with them.
I mean, it's interesting because it's 4 different tribes. So like the Delaware might handle their dead differently than the Shawnee, differently than the Mingo, etc.
Maybe.
But it's good to know. I just think, yeah. So point is, we don't really know a lot about how many natives died, but people have seen full body apparitions of the soldiers through the woods.
Yeah, I would say there's a very good chance that natives did die in that battle as well.
Well, yeah, the British won.
Yes.
They don't retreat for fun.
Correct.
Battle expert Sarah says, don't retreat for fun. Visitors also report hearing voices and strange noises when no one is around. And I feel iffy about the strange noises claim, as I always do, because what does that mean? Give me an example. It didn't. In the research, I couldn't find what it is. And if it's something like screaming or the rustling of leaves, those could just be ambient noise that you're hearing when you're on your hike. There might be animals in the woods that you're not seeing. There were neighborhoods nearby, so it could be kids screaming. I think the strange noises claim is iffy for me unless it's very specific.
I agree. This is one of those that quickly falls in the category for me of like, well, the door just opened. And it's like, well, was there a draft or anything? I always cite that, but...
Right. It is a park, and we do have to remember that, because also, while we were there, we didn't see a ton of people, but we didn't see them until they were right in front of us, especially in the woods. So if we had gone into the woods, hiked a little, made some noise, and then hiked the other way out, someone could theoretically have never seen us. So I think you have to, in a public space like that, that's open, you have to be aware that there could be other things causing these sounds.
Hi listeners! We're so excited to tell you about our partnership with Haunted US. Haunted US is an online publication that brings you credible articles on the history and specific paranormal claims of haunted locations across the country. We've even used them to research some of our episodes. Visit hauntedus.com for new haunted places every Thursday.
Others report feeling sick while walking through the battlefields or feeling overall negativity there. And I will say, this hike / walk / investigation was probably one of the most disrespectful things I ever said at a paranormal site, and I did not mean it, and I felt terrible after I said it. So what happened is...
So casually, too.
Well, yeah. So what happened was there was sirens going off, and David was joking, and he said something like, oh, it's a tornado siren. And I said, no, I grew up where there was a lot of tornadoes. That's not a tornado siren. And he said, oh, it's a nuclear meltdown. We're going to, like, the world is ending. And I said, this is a beautiful place to die. And it was like a mental record scratch, because what I meant is, like, we were walking past the memorial and there's flowers there, and I'm out spending the day with my husband, enjoying myself at this haunted site. What I did not mean was to be disrespectful. And I actually out loud said, 1, to David, and 2, to any lingering spirits, like, I am so sorry. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to take away from all of the deaths that have happened here, but it was definitely a record scratch moment.
Oh, yeah. Me and the spirits were cringing really hard.
I was cringing really hard. I was like, I cannot believe I just said that.
I was like, man, that's a heaping level of disrespect you just served.
I know, and we always try to be so respectful. But other than me saying it was a great place to die, which I did not truly mean, I would say that I see how you can see negativity there, because a lot of people did die, and that is really heavy, but they have turned it into a beautiful place.
Yeah,
so
I certainly didn't feel any negative energy or, like, negative feeling as we went through it.
Yeah, and I think, as always, how you interact with the history and the spirits that might be there really creates the result of how you feel. You know, if you are just reading the history and understanding battle tactics, or you're not fixating on the loss of life, it will be, of course, less heavy. Versus if you're fixating on the loss of life, then it's going to feel heavier. And also, I think we've said all the time, the way you go in, your intentions at a site can really affect how a spirit's going to interact with you. If you say something stupid, like, this is a great place to die, then maybe the spirit's going to hate you. But before I said that, we went in with such a positive outlook that I think it makes sense that we didn't feel any outward negativity.
Yeah, and all the spirit knows, it just needs to punish you by just not interacting with you.
I know. Oh gosh, I felt so bad. I still feel bad about it. So moving on to other people's less cringy moments. Some people report hearing groans or moans as they walk around. And again, I feel like I'm so, like, wah wah this episode, but that could just be people hiking.
Yeah.
There were some intense hills that we went up. So I could see people, like, going up the hill, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it could be hikers, it could be all sorts of different animals. I'm wah-wahing this as well, but, like, not sounding super paranormal to me, but it is still reported as, like, paranormal.
Yeah, and you don't know, it could be. I mean, I'm much more apt to call it paranormal if you've caught it on a recording and you didn't hear it in person there, or if you're getting it through a spirit box, or if it's connected to REM pod activity, you know, something like that, that would show more linkage. But I think when you're just hiking, it's hard to tell.
For sure. It would be interesting to go there at night, but then again, you're still dealing with, like, the, like, potential of animals and whatnot.
Yeah, and you can't go at night because it's a park. It closes at dusk.
When do they do spooky ghost tours?
That is the time that we could do it. And I think they're open to investigations, and here's why. A local paranormal group called Point Paranormal actually did an investigation here, so either they're still open to it, or at least they were open to it at some point. So they did have some luck engaging with spirits here, and this is where I stopped being, like, the Debbie Downer of and the skeptic of the episode. So specifically at the monument, which we mentioned when we were talking about the fake bags of flour, it's up on top of the hill. There's the bags of flour, there's a monument, and then there's tons of information on the history here. And they went up there first and they engaged with the spirits there using EMF readers. They saw decent EMF activity, and they also had temperature fluctuations. This happened when saying the names of 2 of the British soldiers that we know did perish in that battle. So they're engaging directly with the spirits, and they even said things like, hey, can you drop the temperature down to this level? So they were trying to find, specific evidence, not just generic temperature drops. But I think in general, rapid temperature drops is indicative of something literally paranormal, because there's no reason for temperatures to drop like 10 degrees.
Well, so it does depend,
Okay.
I would say, of like location, if you have like a thermal camera or something.
Sure.
Like for instance, if there's like a gorge or something and a nice gust comes from there, it's going to be dramatically colder than the ambient temperature of like a hill.
I could see that. I guess I should say in this situation, it feels concrete.
Right. So if you had like a thermal camera in my mind, and then all of a sudden you just see a cold spot appear, that's kind of interesting, is when if it was like a gust of wind or something, you kind of see it blow in.
It wasn't a thermal camera, it was like a handheld thermometer.
Right.
But still, I think, because it sustained the colder temperature, I still think it's proof of something.
Sure.
And it happened directly after they said those names, accompanied by EMF activity. Again, I think it can be cumulative with multiple points of proof. It makes me feel more confident.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, it's not always indicative of the paranormal, but there are certainly times where it is very unexplainable.
Yeah, absolutely. So they also had some orbs that they captured on photos that they took throughout the investigation, specifically from the burial ground of the troops and the trees that have been there since the battle. So they call them, it was like remembering trees or trees that remember, and that's the name that they give to the trees that have been there since the battle, which I think is a really cool term. I had never heard of it at any other battlefield, but because they've been there so long, they're considered a paranormal hotspot because spirits are in death as they are in life, so they like to interact with things that they knew were there. So there's a lot of activity typically around those 2 trees.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, really cool. And then as they were leaving, they tried one more thing to try to get the spirits to engage with them. They actually played Native American music that was specific to one of the tribes and specific to the time period, and that prompted interactions as well. There was an additional temperature drop, again at the verbal request to see the temperature drop to a certain amount, and there was EMF activity. One of the people there even said, if you drop it to X degree, you can have my water bottle. And the spirits did, so he left his water bottle there.
That's funny. I thought that the final thing they were going to try is just saying aloud, this is a good place to die.
I don't think I said it's a good place to die. I think I said it's not a bad place to die. Regardless, it was tone deaf.
You're right, totally different meaning from bad and good.
I know. Trying to make myself feel a little better. But that's all the evidence I could find. So knowing all that evidence, we're pretty skeptical about a lot of it. What do you think? Do you think it's haunted?
I think it could very well be haunted. I just think that it's one of those areas that it's pretty hard to get evidence of.
Yeah.
I think battlefields in general, especially when it's a big open space, I guess it doesn't have to be just a battlefield, but when it involves like a big open space, like a field or something, that could be really hard to gather evidence versus like a house, which is just a, quite frankly, smaller location.
Yep.
Like less square footage to deal with.
I completely agree. I do think it's haunted. I think it would be great to have some more concrete evidence of it. I'd love to go back on one of the paranormal tours.
Oh yeah, I'd happily go on a paranormal tour. And plus there are some good breweries nearby, or I have not been to these breweries, so I cannot confirm or deny if they're good, but there's some breweries nearby that sound pretty nice.
Yeah, it could be a fun night. And, it's not impossible that we do a formal investigation there. We could always reach out and see.
Absolutely.
Other than just secretly hiking with our EMF reader.
Well, but now that you admitted that thing you said, what, will they let us come do a formal investigation, or are they going to be mortified?
I'm going to be mortified regardless, and will probably spend the whole time just apologizing profusely. But
Oh, I don't have anything to apologize for.
I know. You and Erica can do the investigation while I just sit there and apologize and feel bad. But I definitely do think it's haunted. I think anywhere with this level of loss of life is bound to be haunted. It's also such an important historical spot. Again, a spot that you don't hear a ton about. I guess you don't in general hear a ton about Pontiac's war, but it was very important for preventing the British from losing. So, very cool. I would go back. Sounds like you would go back.
Yes.
Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of Paranormal in Pennsylvania, where we discussed Bushy Run Battlefield. And tune in next week to see what we discuss next. Stay spooky.
Spooky!